Hey everybody, we are back. I'm here joined by David Hall, aka Halsey. Hey, how's it going, Halsey?
Hey, hey, hey. Hello.
um, this is a longtime friend of mine. We worked together at Riot Games on a little indie game called League of Legends back in the day.
Hey,
So
I've
it's
heard of
good to have
that.
you here. We're talking about game types, and this is a four-part series. This is the final part of the four-part series. If you missed the other three parts, those will be good for you to check out. In this section, we are talking about platforms. And no, we are not talking about the platforms that we were referring to in platformers during the game, the genre video, rather. We're talking about the platform that the game is installed on. So essentially, this would be things like a PlayStation 5, a mobile phone, a Nintendo Switch, a PC. These are all platforms. So this is what you enjoy your games on. And each platform has different considerations. What are some differences, Halsey, between some of the different platforms, mainly?
Well, maybe the greatest difference that I can tell off the top of my head would be the differences between like a PC and a mobile device. Like the interface is different, the technical restraints can be different. There's a whole lot that's different between a PC and a phone.
Yes, I like that. That's a good summary. Basically speaking, you cannot put all the same games that are on a PS5 or a PC onto a mobile phone. But why not? Why can't I be playing Elder Scrolls on my phone or uh, Elden Ring or what's some of
Ooh,
these other
yeah,
next or Armored Core
yeah,
6? I want to play Armored Core 6 on my phone. Why can't I?
yeah. You know, you might be able to. That's the thing. Is like these days phones are getting more and more like advanced,
Uh-huh.
and so technically we probably could, but it just doesn't work that way. Uh, when when we're working on games, I say we. I mean the collective we in the industry. Uh, when the studio people who make games, when they make games for mobile, they really have to consider a wide selection of users, people who haven't updated
Mhm.
their phone in 10 years, which I'm guilty of doing that a lot, or people who get like the latest and greatest, right? Which
Uh-huh.
I am not guilty of. Uh, so and their game has to work on phones that are 10 plus years old. Um, and PC has a similar type of issue with that. Like some games, we want to make sure that they can run on older systems for sure, but it really hits hard with mobile devices um, for a lot of reasons, and not just that one. The other reason why you're not able to play the Elden Ring scroll game, whatever it is, what the kids play these days. Uh, the reason you're not able to play that the same way as like on a PC is because it's hard to interface with this thing. It's your finger that's doing it. You've got a gyroscope and you've got your thumbs. Um, so the interface is completely different too. So you might be able to, but it probably wouldn't be a great experience.
Yeah.
That's my 2 cents.
Yeah, definitely we build to the platform. So as effects artists, or really any game developer, the end goal, the end platform that we are delivering the game on should always be in mind. Everything we build, it's like, well, how big is it going to be on screen for the player? Or will the player's finger be covering up this point that they're touching and the effect playing underneath it? Like, how big do I have to make the effect so that it comes out from underneath an average sized finger? Well, to test that, I might need to export out what I'm working on and put it on a phone to actually see it because games are developed typically on PCs, they're developed on computers. but they're not always played on computers. They're often played on phones and consoles. So it helps to have a development kit for a console, so you can actually like quickly export your game over to the console and go sit and play the way that it's going to be played, or export it to a phone so that you can do that. I guess we call it compiling, or when you take a game. We talked about game engines in the previous video. When you take a game and sort of pull it out of the engine and build it so that it is now a working asset that can be installed on a platform, we often call that compiling the game. You know, we do a build of the game is another piece of jargon that we'll do. It's like, oh, the latest build just went out. That means that all the work everyone was doing was gathered into one file that can be installed. That's a build. And then once it's installed, you can test the full experience in whatever state it's in. So we've got all these platforms. Generally speaking, like you're saying, Halsey, absolutely right. Uh, the limitations is the number one thing to consider here. And we say limitations, and it's like, oh, I don't want to be limited. I want to be creative. I want to make whatever I want to make. I actually think limitations are quite nice to work within, because if you say you can make anything in the world that you ever wanted to, that can be overwhelming, and that can actually be creatively damaging, where it's like, well, now I don't know where to start, what to do. But if you say you have this box, you have these constraints that you must work within, it's like, oh, okay, that's a cool problem to solve. Now I'm trying to solve in my mind, okay, this is for a, a 4K TV. I need the pixels to all look great up close on a massive display. How am I going to get it to look that detailed and that good on a big screen? Interesting. I have a tiny screen because it's only going to be on phones. Oh, and also it needs to accommodate old phones, or toasters, as we like to. We usually say toaster for a PC. It's like we'll call them like, oh, okay, it needs to run on basically low spec is another phrase, like low specifications. Um, Basically means old. So that's an interesting constraint too. So what are some other platforms? We've got VR. Have you ever played VR before, Halsey? Do you get motion sick
Oh
like I
yeah.
do? I get pretty motion sick.
Oh, you do? Oh, that's a shame. No, I love VR. I don't get to do it as much as I'd like to. But yeah, I do enjoy VR. Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of really
Nice.
cool things out there. Yeah, what are some other ones? Yeah, we touched on PC, mobile, console, VR.
There's tablets, I guess, which is kind of like a larger
Oh,
mobile
like a
device.
yeah, kind of mobile expanded. That's a uh, you know, that's a thing. That's
Mobile
one.
Plus.
Mobile plus. Yeah.
um, each of these has different ranges, both in age but also in competitors. So, like for example, PlayStation 5 versus the latest Xbox. What is the latest Xbox? It was Xbox One. I have never been an Xbox person. This is
I
like
don't
my
have an
confession
Xbox.
time. I have
You're not
either
alone.
been Nintendo or Sony my whole gaming career. Some people are going to be like, why don't you play Microsoft? I'm sorry. I don't think I've ever owned an Xbox in my life. I've always had, since the first PlayStation, I had a Game Boy, the first Game Boy Color. I had a Nintendo DS.
Nice.
I currently have a Switch and a PlayStation 5. No Xboxes ever,
No Xbox. Yeah. I'm
but
I'm primarily PC. We do have a PlayStation. It's PlayStation 4 though. So
nice. They release
that's
most
what.
games for both these days. They do it for 4 or 5,
Hmm. Yeah.
as of the time of recording this video. So,
Yeah. And my
and
wife and my kids have have Switches. She has like the full Switch, and they have the Switch Lite, I suppose. I think that's what it's
nice.
called. Yeah.
Console families. You know, it's
So
funny. As game developers, this is an interesting question that comes up sometimes. Do I need to play a lot of games to be a good game developer? I would say you need to know about games, and you need to know how they're played and how they're experienced. That doesn't mean you need to be like hardcore. I mean, I would consider myself a pretty big hobbyist with games. I wouldn't say I'm hardcore because I have a job and I have like other stuff to do, but like I love playing games. It is like a major hobby of mine. I wouldn't say that's necessary for all game dev, and some people might disagree with that. I would say it helps to be familiar with the platform you're developing on. So if you are developing for PlayStation 5, you should probably own a PlayStation 5. Like it hey, there's your excuse, right? Hey, I'm working in games. I got to get it,
Yeah,
Um
yeah,
because there's a big difference between a next gen console and older consoles. PlayStation 4 is not that big of a difference, but there's some. But like if you haven't played on a console for say 10 years, you should and you're going to be getting a job working on a current gen console. You need to understand what the competition is doing. You need to understand the levels of fidelity that are achievable if you're going to be working on that. And maybe through your work, they can provide you with opportunities to play these games, or maybe in the office they have, hopefully in the office, they have a PlayStation 5 if you're working on PlayStation 5 games. It's important for you to see it. It doesn't quite do it justice watching it on YouTube, like watching gameplay footage on YouTube. Having the experience of playing it is different, in my opinion, because that's a question that might come up. On the other hand, if you're like, hey, I don't have a wallet for that. I just want to work on indie stuff. That's great. Like, you can go out and pick up a Switch for much cheaper. You can play a lot of these games on most PCs that you already have a PC, or a lot of them on your phone. The important thing is that you know what that end experience is for the player. What's interesting about this is if you get an eye for this, you really start noticing things. For example, in Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, one of the best games I've ever played. I freaking love this game. I want to preface by saying how much I love this game. There are frame rate issues in that game, like big frame rate issues. And when I say frame rate issue, what I mean is that the game is not rendering smoothly. So as you're running around, it's choppy, like, and it's like stepped animation because they didn't properly optimize the game for certain situations. Like, for example, there's a grove of trees where all the apples grow. Some of you who play the game might know. There's just like apples everywhere. It's on the hill that has like all the different resources, and part of that is the apples. Running through that grove, the frame rate is terrible because you have all these leaves and everything else rendering. The team at Nintendo must have decided we don't we're okay with this because we want the visual fidelity to be great everywhere else. We're not going to cut the fidelity of the whole game so that it looks great running through the apple trees. And so they had their platform in mind because that's a limitation, a hard limitation of the Switch, because the Switch is not as powerful as the PlayStation 5. It can't just handle all these things you might throw at it in the same way. But Nintendo knows this. That's why the Switch doesn't cost as much money as the PlayStation 5, which is why they sell more units than the PlayStation 5. And thus, in the end, they make more money than the PlayStation 5 just off of their console sales. And then they make more money off of their game sales because more people have the console, et cetera, et cetera. It's a whole thing. So just because the platform is lower end or not able to handle as much doesn't mean that it's inferior. You might actually be working on a platform that's more popular, that has more users, more players than something that's like next gen, because most people can't afford next gen. So, yeah, that was my rant. What are your thoughts
I
on
love
like
it.
platform differences and
I
like
love
the
it.
importance of having platforms in order to work on them?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the thing that I think about the most about this topic as it pertains to as a visual effects artist is what do I need to prepare myself for? Like if I'm working on a PC game and then I'm going to switch projects and now I'm working on a mobile game, uh, that's a pretty big shift. But uh, like you said earlier, it's not a negative thing to have limitations. It can produce some really great results having these creative limitations, to be told
Mm-hmm.
like, hey, it's not that the sky's your limit. We need the sky to be blue. We need
Mm-hmm.
we need some immediate answers. uh, by having these limitations put in place, it really unlocks you as a creative person to find the solutions that you need to. Sometimes the hardest part is just figuring out where to start and what you can actually do. There's nothing really worse
Absolutely.
than starting at a point in a project and you're throwing things uh, at the problem to see what works, and then you realize that, oh, actually that was too much or that wasn't enough. So having these limitations set at the beginning can be really really useful. So whenever I'm starting a new project, that's one of the first things that I go for. I'll hit up the technical artist or some engineers or something and be like, hey, what kind of budget am I looking for? Can I expect to see on, on the
And when you're
effect
saying
here or
budget,
there?
you're not talking about money. Tell us what you're like, explain for the
Oh
viewer
yeah,
what
there's
you
some
mean by
jargon for
budget.
you. Yeah,
Yeah,
there's
there's a
jargon
bit of jargon.
everywhere. So everything's a budget. Everything, time, energy. But when we're talking about VFX, a lot of the budget that we're talking about is, I don't want to create that apple grove where it slows the game down, right?
Yeah.
Because of my effects. I want to make sure that the effects are as optimized as possible, and they run off of memory and how it interacts with the CPU and the GPU. All of these things draw power from somewhere. I don't know how it works, the computer machines, but I know that if I throw a million particles at my CPU and I start to smell smoke, I've probably gone too far. And so instead of putting my poor CPU through this, sometimes it's best to be like, okay, what's my upper limit? Where should I say, like, don't cross this line, don't do
Hmm.
this, right? Um, and so, yeah, embracing those limitations, I think, is the biggest takeaway. Because once you do that, again, like we've been talking about, hey, what style am I working in? What game engine am I working in? Now what platform am I working in? uh, Once you have started in any of these, then progressing to the next one or trying out another one is not going to be as difficult or as overwhelming. uh, and um, yeah, again, don't be afraid of the limitations. They are not a negative thing. They're absolutely your friend. So try and seek them out.
I think this is a great point to wrap it up to. Like, essentially, just to kind of recap some things here, how you build the effect is going to vary based on the platform. Like Halsey's saying, in some platforms you can throw a million particles at it and it'll handle it and it'll take care of it. In others, you can't. And so the way you build it is different, maybe with many particles or maybe with a few handcrafted particles that are designed to look a certain way. That's going to impact the style of the game. It's going to impact a lot of things. So working closely with the engineers is critical too. You mentioned that, like getting a list of constraints that's unique per project. We get that question a lot, like optimization. What should I be learning about optimization? And that's something else that we talk about regularly inside of our classes is how to optimize based on your target audience. And this goes back to understanding how you want to build your career. Is like, cool, I'm going to work on this kind of effect. That means I need to optimize in this kind of way for this kind of platform. So that's going to be something to keep in mind as you dive deeper into this. We mean optimizing in a way of like hitting a limitation. It's like you build the effect so that it is limited, but also pretty, so that it accomplishes both goals of fitting on the platform, but also looking good. So, just to do a quick recap, we've talked about a lot in this series. There's the style of the game to consider, there's the gameplay of the game. There's the game engine that you build it in, and then the platform that you deliver it on. And any given game can fit the four of these in a variety of ways. There's infinite combinations of what your game is going to be that you're going to be working on. And so, as an effects artist, maybe now having finished this little mini series of videos, you have an idea of what is interesting to you. You know the kinds of styles you like, you know the kind of gameplay you like, you know the game engine that you prefer to work in, and you know what platforms are interesting for you to create games on. And so you combine that all together, and then you can do a search. You can do a cross reference of like, what games out there have this combination, this winning combination for me? Those are the games that you should be aiming toward. Those are the games you should be trying to get jobs working on. And maybe you have a very broad net. And that's good news because it's like, cool, I could do anything. The best place to start in narrowing it down is going to be stylistically. What is the stylistic focus that I want to have? Because with one really good portfolio that's an amazing style, if the quality is past a certain point that studios are really interested in you, typically the other three, they can figure out how to adapt you to their what they're doing. Um, but we probably did list them in order of importance. So gameplay right after that, because they're looking at things like the camera angle, the specific needs that they have. That's going to be relevant from your portfolio too. So if you want to get specific, you can. If you want to stay broad, that's fine. But the key is focus on a style that resonates with you and get that portfolio looking awesome. So that's your starting point. We're going to cover some more basics in the follow-up videos to this. We like to take you through guiding through level 0 before you get started on actually doing tutorials, so you have a nice idea of what you're getting yourself into in the world of effects. And we'll be picking that up later. Halsey, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks
So
for
good
having
having
me.
you.
Yeah,
Uh, and we're going to hear more from you in some future videos as well, I believe. So
that's right.
that'll be fun too. All right. Okay, thanks everybody for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one.